For any pilot, an uncontrollably raging fire inside their aircraft is just about the worst thing that can happen. During a 1998 overnight trip from New York to Geneva, Swissair 111 experiences a fire. The crew is left without instruments as the fire consumes the plane's electrical equipment. All 229 persons on board are killed as this big airliner crashes into the water along the coast of Nova Scotia. As technology advanced, airlines sought more efficiency from their aircraft, while also seeking to entice new passengers to book with them. At this point, aboard contemporary aircraft, personal in-flight entertainment was starting to gain traction. Passengers used to often share a screen and were unable to choose the kind of entertainment offered on board. As a result, Swissair seized the chance to test out the new in-flight entertainment system on their brand new MD-11s in an effort to promote a new selling feature. First-class passengers and others may pick from a variety of movies, TV series, and games to play for the first time on this gadget. The way the specific plane's in-flight entertainment system was implemented, rather than the technology itself, was partly to blame for Flight 111's downing. A large amount of electrical wiring and insulation run the entire length of the MD-11, hidden from view above the passenger cabin. A bulkhead at the front galley divides the area between the cabin fuselage and the nose section, with a small opening to allow the wiring to pass through. Additionally, the plane's skin, which is covered in a metallic polyester film composed of polyethylene terephthalate, provides a lot of insulation in this attic region. Such materials are all subject to a safety inspection prior to being authorized for flight. Naturally, this is dependent on the laws of the nation where the aircraft is registered. This substance that encased the installation on the MD-11 was really very combustible, even though it had the FAA's permission. The electrical wiring for the in-flight entertainment system and other features was put on this extremely smarter aircraft, registered as Hotel Bravo India Whiskey Foxtrot, with very little slack since it was fastened on a bracket. In addition to sometimes bumping during takeoff or landing, aircraft also continuously shake and vibrate when in the air. This indicated that the live wire inside was becoming visible because the wires were chafing the bracket to which they were attached and causing the insulation to erode. This is what happened on this screwball aircraft, and we'll revisit what transpired thereafter. September 2, 1998. Bravo India Hotel Swissair 111, operating as Whiskey Foxtrot, will make an overnight journey from New York JFK to Geneva, Switzerland. Along with the 14 crew members, 219 passengers board the aircraft. It's interesting to note that 2 authentic Pablo Picasso paintings were among the valuable cargo this aircraft was transporting. With some of the most seasoned flight crews, Swissair was considered one of the greatest airlines in the world in 1998. Urs Zimmermann is the captain and pilot in charge. In addition to flying more than 10,000 hours, this 50-year-old also spends his time instructing new pilots for Swissair. 36-year-old First Officer Stefan Lowe has over 5,000 flying hours under his belt. His career as an airline pilot began when he was serving in the Swiss Air Force. Swissair Flight 111 departs New York at shortly before 28 in the evening, traveling northeast along the North American coast. Unusual during the first 10 to 15 minutes of the flight, there was a radio blackout from the aircraft shortly after takeoff because to a communication and tuning issue. As the passengers and staff get settled for the lengthy journey ahead, everything on board goes as usual for the first 50 minutes. It is thought that 8 of the cables for the personal in-flight entertainment system and around a dozen additional wires connected to other systems arsed, out of sight behind the cockpit panel walls. In short, an electrical arc is a phenomenon in which energy from the electrical current is released. It has the capacity to create bursts of intense heat, hot enough to melt the wire from whence it originated. This arcing incident ignites the insulation's flammable metallic sheet, which then gradually starts to burn and fuels the fire. The crew detects an odor in the air about 10 minutes past 10 in the evening local Atlantic time. In order to validate the peculiar scent in the cockpit, the person on board is called to the flight deck. The pilots are informed by the flight attendant that the stench in the cabin is not there. The crew believes that the air conditioning system on the aircraft isn't working properly. A little smoke appears in the cockpit for a little moment, but disappears as soon as it happens. The crew, not wanting to take any risks, gets ready to land the aircraft at the closest acceptable airfield. Initially, Boston was suggested as it is an airport both pilots are used to and has Swissair stationed there. On the western side of the Atlantic, they radio Moncton Center, which is in charge of a great deal of maritime traffic. They make a pan-pan call and radio in. Pan is an urgent message in the context of marine radio telephony. It is not yet a distress call or an emergency. Boston is more than 400 kilometers distant and facing the other direction from where they are now traveling. That night, the controller at work recommends the considerably closer Halifax Airport, which is only 120 kilometers away. Although they are now too high to reach the airport on a straight-in approach, Captain Zimmerman decides on Halifax. The crew asks to dump some gasoline since they are not only too high, but also not positioned in the best manner for a safe landing. To begin the fuel drop, ATC vectored the aircraft over the Atlantic and south of Nova Scotia. The crew starts a checklist called Smoke of Unknown Origin from the Swissair Operating Handbook as the aircraft descends into the Halifax airport. Turning off all non-essential gadgets in the cabin, such as the in-flight entertainment system and the cabin lights, is one of the checklist's tasks. The recirculating fans in the cabin ceiling are another example of non-essential electrical equipment. By forcing smoke and flames away from the plane's nose, these fans are now preventing the fire from spreading to the cockpit. The captain officer followed the checklist instructions to the letter, although the crew was unaware of the location of the fire. The fire then turns and moves toward the cockpit when the recirculating fans in the cabin ceiling are turned off. The crew radioed in a mayday, or distress call, shortly after the fire spread to the flight deck, stating that they had to land right away. The pilots then started heading for the runway. By 10:25 p.m., the autopilot is rendered inoperable as the fire and board begin to consume the aircraft's vital components. In a matter of seconds, Captain Zimmerman transmits the last message from the aircraft to the ground. The passengers on board were probably unaware of what was happening in the cockpit since the fire was mostly confined out of sight in the cabin ceiling and in the cockpit. The flight data and cockpit voice recorders go silent a minute later, but the aircraft is still in the air. The specifics of what transpired in the minutes that followed will never be known, but when ATC watched the aircraft from the ground, they saw that it was turning away from the airport once again and headed west. Investigators into the crash think that Captain Zimmerman got out from his seat to attempt to put out the fire, leaving First Officer Lowe to take control of the aircraft as his main navigation and flying equipment started to malfunction. Not only does he not know which way he is flying, but he also doesn't know if the aircraft is ascending or falling. This MD-11 is untrustworthy in the pitch-black cockpit with no horizon. Swissair 111 was flying blind for more than 4 minutes when, at 10:31 p.m., it nose-down smashes into the Atlantic Ocean. The aircraft breaks apart upon collision, traveling at almost 500 kmph. The MD-11 is instantaneously destroyed. Over 2 million fragments of the aircraft were retrieved from the seabed after the accident by a salvage operation. Only one of the 229 passengers' bodies has been discovered whole. With far over 90% of all MD-11 fatalities occurring in this manner, this is the worst occurrence involving the aircraft. In addition, it is the worst aircraft fire disaster ever. Following the tragic events of Swissair 111, Swissair discontinued operations in 2001 and was replaced by a new Swiss airline that is still in existence. This was a deadly blow to the airline. The final MD-11 carrying people took flight in 2014, while fleet operators continue to rely on this dependable aircraft type. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our future content. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep exploring.